There is fun. Okay. Okay, so you get all the updates of my classes. Alright? Now, listen carefully. Today we will be having a test, right? You know? Okay. So I'll be giving it to you later on. But before that, let's just finish up this part here. This is the last part for your 8.3, alright? Once you have done with this model, then 8.4, there will just be examples of past year exam questions that you expected to see in the long questions. And then you're only left with macro 9, and then the syllabus is all done. Okay? So, let's take a look at what we have here. This is actually the open economy when there is no capital mobility, and the exchange rate in this case can be fixed or it can be basically flexible. Alright? Now, I hope that you could recall what I have given you previously in terms of the understanding of basically the syllabus here. If you could recall, this is what happens in 2 weeks ago, right? Where we were doing this model last week, when we were doing this model, I show you mainly the difference between a PCM and an NCM model. In an NCM model, the main difference is that there is zero capital mobility, or basically there is no capital mobility. And there's total restrictions of the capital inflow and outflow, which means that, the money shouldn't be flowing out of the economy, it shouldn't be flowing in, so there is actually no hot money. Are you ready? I hear a lot of talking, Now this part here is examinable, alright? In the exam, you don't know this model, you cannot do the question. Alright? Now, so if we take a look at the balance of payment under the no capital mobility, given that there is no capital mobility here, so this part here, we will not see any inflow or outflow, that will basically has to mean that when we look at the balance of payment, we will only look at the NX, because this part here is no movement, means that to me, even there is a changes in terms of the interest rate, there is no movement. So this part here will be 0. So your balance of payment here under the no capital mobility model will have to be depends only on your current account, which is the NX. So what we notice is that under balance of payment here, if you are having a balance of payment balance, in this case, we will be having NX equals to 0. If you are having, let's say, NX greater than 0, you will be running into a surplus. If your NX is less than 0, then your balance of payment will be running into a deficit. Okay? So since NX to us is so important, of course we need to keep a close look on our NX diagram. Correct? So based on that, if we go back to our term notes, this is what we have derived last week as well, where we look at actually the NX equation, remember? I told you before, if you compare this NX equation to a linear straight line, you notice this whole portion that we have here, this part here, alright, this part here, this is actually like your y-intercept. And this is actually the gradient of this line here. And if you notice that, given that the gradient is minus m, we will expect the NX graph supposed to be downward sloping. So this is how my NX graph will look like. Does it make sense? Because this is your income, this is NX, they are negatively related as shown by the gradient minus m here. So this line will be downward sloping. Now, how do we read this graph? Look carefully. At this income y0 here, when we look at this point, NX is equals to 0. How do you know? because your NX is actually on the y-axis. So at this income, if you are here, if you look at the NX here, this is 0, right? Any income that is less than y0, you look at this line, what happened? It is showing you that you are at this portion here, where the NX is actually at this part here. So what happened to your NX? It is greater than 0 because it's positive. This portion here now lies below the NX line, which is the negative part. Can you see? So this portion here, your NX will be less than 0. This is how we read it. Some students say, why should we bother about reading this diagram? Now, this is your savior in the exam. You have to base on the points, so basically go and get out the model. Where is it and how does it actually affect the way we draw the diagram? Okay? So today we are going to look at how we will basically start off with no capital mobility model. Alright? And the first one that we will be doing will be expansionary monetary policy. We will draw them together, no worries. Look carefully at how I'm going to draw the graph. You can't draw it any way that you want. Okay, there is a specific way where we are drawing the graphs here. So let's start off with this. Now, I want you to understand that, when we are doing a monetary policy here, expansionary monetary policy, we are basically showing that money supply is rising, or it can be that the central bank basically buy government bonds, or the central bank basically reduce the reserve ratio in this question. Okay? Now, some students came in and they asked me this question. They say, when central bank buy government bonds, I thought that, okay, that's what the students tell me, I thought that government spending will increase. They say, why is it only expansionary monetary policy? I thought that, when the central bank buy government bonds, I thought that, G will be rising at the same time. Why you only call this as a monetary policy? What's the reason? What is the reason? You see, the paraphrasing is different. Let me teach you. Since we are talking about it, look at the paraphrasing. If we talk about, let's say, the government finance spending by borrowing from the central bank, then yes, we will see two things happening. The government, because they want to increase spending, they must go and find money to increase the spending, right? So what do? They borrow from the central bank. So they will sell the bonds to the central bank buy the bond, and then the money supply will increase. Agree? But let's say in this question, they just say that central bank buy government bonds. That's all. They are just buying, not because of any reason. They are just buying. Then the central bank here will increase the money supply. That's all. Can you see? There is no government increasing. Because they are only solely the one buying. They buy bonds for what? Why are the government selling bonds? Maybe they just want to sell bonds. They not necessarily need the money to finance it for spending. You have to look at the words. How do they describe this? There is a difference between the two. Okay? Can you see the difference? Finance spending by borrowing from the central bank means that they need to get money in order to spend. So basically, G will increase, money supply will increase. But this question is solely just the behavior of the central bank to buy government bonds. Alright? Not because the government needs